Welcome back, and it's a delight and certainly an honor to have with us our good friend Dr. Gene Getz, and he's the chief editor of this incredible resource called the Life Essential Study Bible, which has the QR codes in it. We've talked a lot about it. I can't say enough about this resource that Gene has brought to all of us and made it available. There's a picture of it there on the screen. You can go to BiblePrinciples.org.com, whatever that is, one of them. You can get it there. But every time we talk about this, I know that the bookstores around here in Southern Oregon quickly run through these books and these Bibles. But let me encourage you to check it out. There's over 1,500 QR codes between Genesis and Revelation. And Gene will pop up in a video and begin to speak and give you a Bible study on that key portion of Scripture and the principle behind it. Now, Gene, I got to say, I didn't know you were going to be on the show today. I'm delighted you are. I was pretty tired last night, so I took the Bible, took the Life Essential Bible, and I went to bed with my phone, and I brought up two portions of your study in Isaiah 44 and Isaiah 45. And I had read those earlier, and I thought, I wonder what Gene has to say about this. So I went and got the Life Essential Study Bible, and I pulled you up. And I have to tell you, you really helped me process something with these two portions of Scripture.
Wonderful.
And that is, it's very possible that no matter who becomes president, that God could actually use that person to bring about His purposes. And the whole issue that surrounds King Cyrus fascinated me, because I thought, wait a minute, man, there's some real parallels here.
That's right. That's right.
And I thought, we need to step back and get the big picture. And you did such a beautiful job switching my brain from wanting to put God into my box and me stepping out of that and saying, wait a minute, God's much bigger than this, and He has a bigger plan than I could ever possibly imagine. So I want to say thank you. It was so timely. And by the way, if you go to the Life Essential Study Bible and you bring up those two, Isaiah 44 and Isaiah 45, the one in Isaiah 45 deals with, must understand that God can choose Abraham from paganism in order to provide salvation for all the nations of the world. That particular one ends with the most beautiful song. So obviously I got one of the new ones where you inserted the song in there, and it's beautiful. I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, boy, I was just reviewing this. In fact, I was on the way in this morning, and Felix called me, and I had prepared for two other principles, but he said, you want to talk about these two? So I put the pedal to the metal, and I got here. And I sat and reviewed these, and I think they're so appropriate. And as you say, you know, here in Isaiah chapter 44 and 45, it talks about God's sovereignty and relationship, particularly to leaders. And that's why I stated the principle the way I did here, that we're to understand and believe that God can use anyone or anything to achieve His divine purposes. And of course, what Isaiah is prophesying, and he's still there in the Jerusalem area, and he's still under the leadership of some pretty evil kings in Judah. Most of them were evil, few exceptions. And he prophesies from the Lord's, through the Spirit of God, that Cyrus would eventually deliver the children of Israel from captivity. And that's 2 centuries in advance, and God actually gave him the name of Cyrus, which is recorded here in Scripture, calling Cyrus my shepherd. And also God really used a word that really means Messiah.
Right.
And in the sense he was foreshadowing the coming of the Messiah even through this pagan king. And of course what happened then after they were in captivity for 70 years, God put it in the mind of Cyrus to return about 50,000 Jews that returned to Jerusalem. And Cyrus, he had a whole different philosophy than Nebuchadnezzar in terms of not bringing people into captivity, but to distribute them back to their lands and give them freedom to operate. So you see the human element, but you also see the divine element, which, by the way, is how in the world can we really explain the fact that God determines the affairs of mankind, and yet he gives us freedom to act in a way that we can influence what happens. Now, I can't explain that.
Yeah, neither. I feel so much peace about reading these two, and I hadn't even defined my own peace yet. It's reopened my mind to think, well, wait a minute, God forgive me for thinking so small, that you actually can manipulate this. That's the wrong word. You could actually manage this in a way that brings about your will. Because part of the problem we have, and Gene, you and I have talked about this, there's a remnant church in America that truly wants righteousness to be restored.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine that a loving God for a moment is going to ignore their prayers.
No, I agree. I agree,
so
absolutely.
How could God bring about the answer to those prayers? So can he use a pagan king, so to speak, to bring about the very thing that they've been praying for? And are we willing to open up our eyes and hearts to accept it that way?
That's right. And yet you come back to the human aspect in terms of our present and current situation. And I was thinking about this, that from a human point of view, let's compare who will probably be the two candidates. You know, on the liberal side, we know a lot of things. We know the liberal agenda. We know the values as it relates to, let's say, sexual activity, abortion, public restrooms, the thing you were just talking about. We know what that agenda is. We know what the agenda is for the appointment of Supreme Court judges. Now, on the other side, regardless of the candidate, whether we agree with everything that Trump does, and it looks like he will be the candidate, the fact of the matter is, God can use him. And by the most encouraging thing to me is the fact that he just released the names of, 10 potential Supreme Court judges?
11.
11 that are all conservative, all pro-life. And the fact is that that factor alone could change the history, our history, for the next 100 years.
Well, they say people is policy. So whoever a president picks to be around him is a statement of his policy. Now, we know that his religious reflection probably isn't as strong as we'd like to have it.
Absolutely.
However, it's not totally void.
It's not void, but just even divorce that. Just think in terms of what he says he wants to do for America, and particularly with Supreme Court judges. I mean, we got to look at these human factors, because God, there's no perfect candidate, especially in our culture today, in our society today. And we've just got to recognize that. And obviously, we're not living in the same situation as the children of Israel. By the way, if you go back to Jeremiah, I was looking at that principle. And Jeremiah was living in Jerusalem, and he knew through inspiration that Nebuchadnezzar was coming in. And if you go back to Nehemiah's words, he said, look, you children of Israel, look, be submissive to this man, because if you are submissive to him, you'll live. If you're not submissive, you're going to die. And then he goes on to say, now eventually God then will judge Nebuchadnezzar, which he did, because the king Cyrus came in and judged Nebuchadnezzar. So, you know, God can take all of these human variables, even the worst situations, and work them together for his good. And I think your insight there and what you've come up with is where we ought to be spiritually and biblically.
Well, let me just give our viewers and listeners Isaiah starting with 1, 2, and 3. It's pretty simple. And it says, the Lord said to Cyrus, his anointed. Now,
that's right.
You could unpack that for a week. Cyrus, a pagan king, is anointed, whose right hand I have grasped to subdue nations before him, to disarm kings, and to open the doors before him, and gates will not be shut. I will go before you. I will level uneven places. I will shatter bronze doors and cut through the bars of iron in two, and I will give you the treasures of darknesses and riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am Yahweh, the God of Israel, who called you by name. Do we have, as believers, the humility to accept God using somebody else but one of our own to save us?
Well, great insight, my friend. Preach it. And I think that's where we are. And the fact is, and you know this, and I know this, that not to vote is to vote for the liberal agenda. That's exactly what we'll be voting for by not voting. And we've got to look at those factors. And I think also we need to pray in the sense that if there's a third-party candidate, that's suicide. Perot proved that. That put Mr. Clinton in the White House. So we need to be praying that God will give leadership through all of those that are wrestling through all of these issues today. And we're not to just stand on the sidelines. One of the things we can do is always pray. And we can talk about that in the second segment, because I think that's the foundation of where we are right now in terms of what Paul said about prayer for government. But we can't just stand on the sidelines and say, you know, Sarah, Sarah, what will be, will be. We can't do that. We must not do that. We must use the freedoms that God has given us to from a human point of view, to cast our votes, even though it's not a perfect situation. And I think that's exactly where we are at this present time.
All right, let me take a break. We'll come back and we'll pick up the one over in Isaiah 45. It says, we must understand that God chose Abram from paganism in order to provide salvation for all nations of the world. So the pattern seems to be pretty clear through the Bible that God can use the ungodly to bring about the godliness that he wants. That's the sovereignty of God, which we have a hard time swallowing. And so in the meantime, Gene, send me your speeding ticket. I'll pay it. We'll be right back with Gene Getz in just a moment.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Okay, we're back with our good friend, Dr. Gene Getz. He is the chief editor of the Life Essential Study Bible. And let me encourage you, if you don't have a copy of this, you're really missing it. I just can't say enough about this resource. And over the last 24 hours, it has impacted my life in a great way. Now, as you know, our family's been involved in politics. We have a son that served in the legislature. I was chairman of the party for quite a few years. We've been involved in this cycle, so we're concerned about it. Not as politicians, but as citizens and Christians, what's best for our culture. And I came out of this election cycle and the primary cycle like you with a heavy heart, saying, okay, God, where are you? What's going on? And I had read Isaiah 43 through 46 a couple of times, but then last night I laid in bed and I thought, you know, I'm going to pick up the Life Essential Study Bible and see what Gene Getz has to say about it. So I picked it up, I ran my phone over it, and Peggy and I sat there listening to Dr. Getz on these two principles, Isaiah 44 and Isaiah 45. Principle number 33 says that we are to understand and believe that God can use anyone or anything to achieve his divine purposes. And I tell you, you got to see this. Go buy the Bible and just pull up this one. It'll change your thinking. And then I went ahead and went over and looked at 34, and it says, we must understand that God chose Abram from paganism in order to provide salvation for all nations of the world. Here's the question. Is it possible that God can use somebody that is not so overtly Christian to bring about the answers to our prayers? And the answer is yes, and are we open to it?
Absolutely.
And I think what has happened here is that, Gene, you point out and you took it a little deeper, we have a choice between left and right, of liberalism that is obviously what it is, it's taken us crazy.
And we know the agenda. We absolutely know the agenda.
We know the agenda, and the agenda is not godliness by any means. And so the question remains, can God use Trump to bring about the answers to our prayers? I know a lot of people yelling and screaming at the radio and television right now, but give it a chance.
Well, my response to that is if he could use Pharaoh to deliver the children of Israel, that pagan, evil man, if he could use Nebuchadnezzar, who was totally evil, if he could use Cyrus, who was a pagan, if he could use, and you can go on and on in relationship to the way in which God used pagans, going all the way back to Abraham. Abraham was not a believer. He was a pagan. He worshiped idols. In fact, I think when Paul said there was none righteous, no, not one, he was referring to that era. And God reached down in his grace, in his sovereignty, brought Abraham out of that paganism, brought him to himself, and I think ultimately his conversion happened that one night when he took him even in the land of Canaan and said, Abraham, look at the scars. I am going to give you a son and a seed. And it says Abraham believed God and God counted him for righteousness. So he was using Abraham before he ever became a true believer. So to answer your question, can God use Trump? Absolutely. Absolutely. You would also have to say, can God use Hillary? I'd have to say yes, but I'd much rather look at Trump and where he is from the standpoint of his policies or his philosophy in terms of what God could do. And as I said, if he can appoint conservative judges, if that's the only thing he did, that would be incredible, because that's going to influence the future of our society.
There's another part of this that gave me great hope. And I'm still processing the peace that I have in my heart today to know that God does hear our prayers. Those who are truly crying out for America to be saved, for righteousness to return, for godliness to return. I believe God now is hearing those prayers. I wasn't sure for a while. I didn't know if God was spanking us or loving us.
Maybe both.
Well,
Maybe
probably
both.
both. But what we hear here now is that we ought to come away with great anticipation. If we do our part to pray and keep Trump in check, then God can use him.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, what you've just said takes us back to what Paul wrote to Timothy. And when he said, Timothy, and Timothy was in Ephesus, and Paul had gotten out of prison, and he wrote to Timothy. Now, keep in mind, when he wrote this, Nero was in power. He was an evil man. Herod, one of the Herods, was in power, that Herod Agrippa, King Agrippa, that Paul testified against, or for, when he was before him. Felix, the governor, Festus, these guys were evil. They did not believe. And so here's Paul getting out of prison, ultimately going back into prison. He says, first of all, Timothy, I urge that petitions, prayers, intercessions, thanksgivings be made for everyone, for kings, Agrippa, and certainly all those who are in authority. Nero, the most evil guy that existed, the man that was going to put him to death. So what did they pray? Pray that we might, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. Boy, do we need that today because of what's coming in on us in relationship to what's coming out of the White House in relationship to even the thing you were talking about before in terms of this transgender situation, this issue. We may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. And what is the ultimate purpose of that? This is good, and it pleases God our Savior, who wants everyone to be saved, come to knowledge of the truth. In other words, we are to pray that God will indeed use whoever is in power to give us a sense of tranquility and peace in our culture so we can keep on proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, that doesn't mean we just stop with prayer. We act. Paul was very limited in what he could do. Timothy was limited in what he could do. Christians in the Roman Empire, far more limited. I mean, they were marginalized. we still have opportunity here to voice our opinions, to influence, to be salt, to be light. So, pardon me for preaching, but I'm just expounding on what you said. That's all.
No, you preach it, and I'll turn the pages. But there's just so much here. I want to encourage our viewers and listeners, if you don't have this Bible, go get one. Check it out at the bookstores or Bible Principles website there, and you can get one there, but look it up. And if you have a QR code reader, but I tell you, I've enjoyed this immensely through all various books of the Bible. I've been jumping around, but somehow I came across these two in the last couple of weeks, and then most importantly, last night I sat down and I'm watching Gene on the video there on the QR code for chapter 44 in Isaiah and chapter 45 in Isaiah, and I came away with great hope that if we continue to be vigilant with our prayers and our actions, that our prayers will be handled, and God could use a Trump to do it. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Now, and I think it goes a little sharper than that. I think there's some wisdom about evil here. And I want to say this carefully, but it appears to me that the liberal agenda is evil. It's anti-God and it's evil. It's evil against parents, children, and the list goes on and on. In fact, it's more on the death side of things than it is on the life side of things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there are elements of the positive, but certainly right at the heart of all of these issues. Just take abortion as just one issue, or morality. The whole issue of morality. And by the way, my associate Felix just put in my hand before we went on the air here is there's an article, and I want to pursue this, but it's written by Dr. Paul McHugh, the Distinguished Service Professor of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University. And he has come out evidently with a strong case that transgender issues, in the most part, are in the same category as bulimia, as these problems that people have in viewing their body. He said it is a psychiatric condition, and he's taking a strong stand against the fact that, generally speaking, this is a genetic thing. It is from birth. Now, probably exceptions, but I want to pursue this article because evidently it's kind of a blockbuster kind of article with a man that's very qualified in identifying these transgender issues. So I thought I'd just mention that, and we can take a look at it and see what that is.
So, Gene, I only got about a minute left. I wish I had you for about 3 hours today. I'm just so taken by this, and I'm still processing it. And I know that a lot of us had other candidates in mind, but let's deal with the obvious. Trump's the guy out there now representing the right. How are we to pray for him?
Well, I think we ought to pray for salvation, first and foremost. I think that we need to pray that there will be influences on him. By the way, I understand that he has a copy of my Life Essential Study Bible because I got an email from a man who's in radio who was at a Trump rally and who actually gave him a copy of my Bible. I would pray that he would open it. Maybe open it to something would pop off the page at him that would bring him to a relationship with Jesus Christ, if indeed he doesn't know him. We need to pray for salvation. We need to pray that he will surround himself with individuals who have our values.
Gene, I'm out of time.
I
hate to step on you, buddy, but thank you so much. I want to say to our viewers again, go to Bible Principles website, check out the Bible, check it out at the bookstores, get a copy. Brother, thank you. Your work touched me deeply last night. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and God bless.
God bless.